Here's some news in the sort of podcast online media business that we thought was worth mentioning. The problem with Jon Stewart cancellation highlights a problem for Apple's content. So this was a piece written by Samuel Axon for Ars Technica regarding the news that the Jon Stewart Apple TV show has in fact been canceled. Russell, do you want to read this one since you found this one? It's up to you.
Sure.
All right.
Jon Stewart and his weekly talk show, The Problem with Jon Stewart, are out at Apple, according to reports from the New York Times and Variety. Apple canceled the show just weeks before its third season began taping. Its cancellation sheds some light on the conflict of priorities Apple faces as it leans more into content rather than just selling tools, platforms, and gadgets. The New York Times article cites several people with knowledge of the situation, saying that staffers working on the show were told at the end of the day Thursday that it would not move forward. The reason for the shift? Stewart and Apple executives, quote, had disagreements over some of the topics and guests, unquote, the sources said. Specifically, they claimed Stewart told staffers that Apple execs took issue with planned programming related to both China and artificial intelligence. Hey, man, if you don't want to make us paranoid that you're all a bunch of robots, maybe don't take exception when he wants to do a segment on artificial intelligence.
Right.
This is content moderation by the T1. And noted that with the 2024 U.S. election coming up, there might have been additional opportunities for disagreement then.
Oh, we wouldn't want that.
Wouldn't want disagreements in
between
a
a corporation like Apple, a child enslaving corporation like Apple, and a woke progressive host. Wouldn't want us to have a disagreement there. Wouldn't want them to not be on the same page. Go ahead.
Apple does much of its business, both in production and sales, in China. And in China. I don't think I'm giving away a secret here. Jose Vega, who's just in China, he said that cracked them up in China when he did his Donald Trump, which is actually pretty good. Next time we have him on, we'll have him do his China.
Oh, his impressions are very good. His impressions are very good. He does a few of them in the upcoming documentary, which is nearing completion. We're very excited. We're going to have that soon for you folks.
I just saw a rough cut. It looks very good. Looks very good.
But you didn't see the whole rough cut. You saw the intro.
I saw a section. Yeah. I mean, but I'm assuming it doesn't fall off a cliff right after that section.
Gets better.
I bet it does. And does much of his business in China is invested heavily in the country's infrastructure. Regarding China, Apple execs may have been worried that Stewart's planned commentary could alienate customers or partners in the country. As for AI, Apple has increasingly focused on AI for software features on the iPhone. Primarily, it uses machine learning to drive things like search suggestions, photography, and palm detection. There have also been rumors that Apple plans to get into ChatGPT like large language models, which have been more controversial. We're just engaging in informed speculation about the specific reasoning, though. Apple declined to comment on the New York Times story. The show's cancellation is indicative of the kinds of challenges owners of platforms like Apple, Amazon, Google, and others face when they are producing content too. Apple TV Plus, the iPhone, and other Apple products only work with children's tears incorporated into the microchips. Right. They are... That's not in there. I'm sorry.
Russell's edit for those listening on the audio.
That was an editorial note.
Yeah.
To go back to the actual article, are used by a wide range of people, and investing in content that may be contentious for key customers or partners could create big problems for the company's overall business. It's also part of a larger pattern of streaming services struggling with the talk show format. There have been numerous attempts, but most talk shows like Netflix, Norm Macdonald Has a Show, have not been hugely successful. Oh, you think? I didn't even know that existed. In part,
well, it's easier to run a show when the host is alive, but
yeah, but I didn't know.
No, it got canceled before.
Did you?
Yeah.
Did you? Yeah,
no, I never knew that was a show. And Norm Macdonald was one of the funniest guys out there. You'd think,
oh
how
yeah,
could the
he
show
was.
fail with Norm?
He was. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just don't think, because they tried that with Letterman too, and it failed. I just don't think people go to Netflix to watch things like that.
Right.
in part because the business model of streaming TV is as much about the long-term value of content as it is about timeliness, and talk shows tend to focus on topics du jour. It's a good point. The problem with Jon Stewart was Stewart's first return to hosting a TV show since his much praised and widely watched tenure on The Daily Show ended in 2015. Right before he would have gotten really useful. Stewart has not yet announced any future television plans. All right, so this is, as the article points out, this is part of the problem of having content creation taken over by these technology companies that rely heavily on selling goods in China. And, you know, I know we're going to get our China stands coming at us and all that. But listen, man, I mean, they have a long history of censoring content coming into the country. That's why they had to take the Taiwan flag off of Tom Cruise's jacket for Top Gun Maverick. That's why John Boyega's face was either removed or greatly reduced on the Star Wars posters. The Black Panther, they covered over his face with a mask for that. So, you know, this, and if anyone has ever seen, and I like John Cena, and look, I mean, I can't judge. He saw his whole career going up in smoke. But if you have ever seen John Cena's apology to China, he speaks Mandarin apparently. He's like he's like a Renaissance man. He's like the Greek ideal. He's this athlete scholar. So in Mandarin, he apologized for insulting the Chinese, just begged for forgiveness for, I think his sin was to refer to Taiwan as a country.
Yeah, he had to apologize for that.
Yeah, he had to apologize. See, I'm so sorry, only in Mandarin, which somehow made it seem more debasing. So, yeah, this is a problem with the kind of speech you're going to get from corporations that are dependent on the Chinese market to sell and to manufacture their iPhones. I mean, it's an angle we haven't really thought a lot about in terms of censorship. And, you know, let me make it clear for our China stance. I'm not knocking China. Like, what China wants to do in their country is their business. And, you know, that's very much my take when we talked about the Muslim world on the Bill Maher segment. Like, what people do in their own countries, I don't think is really my business or anybody else's business. But what we do in our country is my business. And if our country is censoring its content because of the sensitivities of another country, yeah, I have an issue with that. I have an issue with that when we're doing it to not offend our government, as we were just discussing in the previous segment. So why would I not have an issue when we're bowing to the wishes of another government?
Right. And the other thing about this, I would say, is that this also, what struck me, like the question I had for myself is, what does Jon Stewart need Apple for? Like, he's Jon Stewart. He's one of the most famous commentators, you know, in the world. If Jon Stewart started a YouTube channel and just did his own fucking show, he'd have 1 million subscribers overnight. I mean, he'd be doing insane numbers just doing what we do. You know, just get a streaming platform, hire a producer, hire a little crew, and he'd be in business. Like, I don't see where these giant tech companies are necessary. Obviously, we are on Google now, but we're not working for Google. Google doesn't control what we say, although really kind of it does.
I mean, it does.
Unofficially.
It does.
It dictates what
that's
we
why
don't
we
say.
go over to Rumble.
Exactly. But, you know, it's not the same. It's not the same kind of thing where they are intimately involved in the production and curation and dissemination of the show. And so now that, you know, podcasting and YouTubing and, you know, other platforms, Rumble, obviously, now that these are so popular and so widely used, what does a guy like Jon Stewart need Apple? Like, what do these big companies bring to the table? Norm Macdonald too, he had a YouTube show. What do he need Netflix for? Like, what do you need it for? If anything, that just narrows your reach. You reach fewer people. I mean, Apple's not like Netflix. It's not everywhere. Not everybody has Apple TV, you know. So, you know, he could do a lot better just going out on his own doing what we do. I hope he doesn't, because we don't need more competition. But he could.
I don't know that we're in the same lane.
Probably.
You know, I mean, that show, we a few times talked about going after some of the segments he did on that show, because very often Look, I think he meant well. I think he was overcompensating for feeling like I'm this old white man that made a terrible joke about trans people once. And so now I have to uncritically adopt every postmodern critical theory that my writers are into and parrot it without thinking about it. So he did, I thought, some terrible, terrible, moronic episodes and commentary.
I mean, the Hillary Condoleezza Rice one was not a highlight for sure.
Yeah, so I thought there were a lot of misfires there, but he also did some good work, and he's Jon Stewart, and he's a voice that even if he's wrong sometimes or we disagree sometimes, I don't think he's a dishonest actor, and he's definitely a voice we'd like to have out there, and hopefully he will go do something else. And you make a good point, and this is something we brought up in relation to the strike. I think the whole business model of these platforms is about to come to an end because of AI. I think that we are very rapidly approaching the place where you can make a studio quality movie in your computer. And when that happens, the barrier to entry that makes Hollywood make sense is gone. You don't need it anymore. It'll still exist as one content creation hub of many. But just as it's already lost a lot of its power, I think what we're seeing with the collapse in box office and just one bomb after another is just the collapse of their whole business. You know, they went all in on foreign distribution. They went all in on these big superhero movies that you don't have to speak fluent English to appreciate. They killed cinema. So now you don't really have the audience for cinema going to their movies anymore. The public is out of the habit of going to see serious movies in the movie theater. Now they watch TV shows for that kind of content, you know, high quality kind of Sopranos and things like that. They don't expect that from their movies anymore. And now the people are finally like, yeah, you know, I just can't see the Green Goblin fight Spider-Man again. I just don't give a fuck anymore. You know, now that that's collapsed, they went all in on it. The whole business model is collapsing. What do they shift to now? What do they make now? They spent 20 years feeding people this fucking superhero movie garbage. What are they going to replace it with? You can't go back to making Taxi Driver. It's too late. You dumbed down the audience for too long now. You can't go back to that. They're not going to go to the movies for that anymore.
Please clap.